Welcome viewers. Before I play this clip, understand what is really being exposed. This is not merely Senator Cash and Senator Sarah Henderson asking definitions for political theatre. This is a collision point created by the 2013 Gillard Sex Discrimination Act framework, where gender identity protections now press against sex-based rights of women. The Lesbian Action Group applied for a Section 44 exemption to hold lesbian-born female-only events, and the Commission refused. The group appealed and lost at the tribunal. Then the Federal Court found legal error and sent the matter back for reconsideration. So when the Sex Discrimination Commissioner appears unable to answer clearly, the concern is not academic, it is practical. Can biological women lawfully gather as biological women? Can female-only spaces still be defended? Can the law distinguish between genuine inclusion and male access into female-defined spaces? And can the Commissioner explain the rules she is responsible for applying? Well, the Chair interjects, the questioning tightens, the Commissioner appears strained, evasive and unhelpfully defensive, but the contradiction remains visible. If male and female are not legally stable, women's protections are not legally stable either. And from a divine sovereign restraint perspective, male and female are not bureaucratic inventions, they are created realities. And when human law treats them as negotiable, women are left beneath the instability created by institutional defiance.
Lesbian Action Group. Just to confirm the sequence of events, they applied to the AHRC under Section 44 of the SDA for a temporary exclusion to hold a lesbian-born female event. My understanding was it for International Lesbian Day?
I believe that's correct.
Yep. So essentially seeking permission to exclude biological males who identify as women from a female-only lesbian gathering. You have the power under Section 44 to grant temporary exemptions from certain provisions of the Act for up to 5 years at a time. That is correct?
That is correct, Senator.
Okay. Subject to specified terms and conditions, and you might put those terms and conditions in. Now, my understanding also is that you have guidelines governing, and I think the Human Rights Commissioner referred to this, you have guidelines governing how you exercise that discretion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The AHRC reviews the exemption. So your decision prohibited the group from staging the planned event. Did you conclude in rejecting the exemption or the application that sex is non-binary and changeable?
I would have to refer to the decision itself, Senator, to answer that
Well,
question.
I put to you that's what you did actually find. Sex is non-binary and changeable, which is the evidence that you've consistently given at estimates, including that Senator Henderson here could actually be a bloke as she sits there right now, which is fine. That's her decision. The Lesbian Action Group appealed to the Administrative Review Tribunal and lost, correct? They then took the matter to the Federal Court, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you appear in the Federal Court? The Australian Human Rights Commission?
Yes,
You did?
Senator.
Okay. Was that by choice? No, you'd be a party to it.
Correct.
So you're a party, right. So my understanding is Justice Mashinsky declared that the AHRC guidelines are deficient. Is that correct?
That is correct. Right. He specifically referred to the need to take into account the indivisibility and universality of human rights in any decision relating to exemptions.
And the principle that every person is free and equal in dignity with rights?
Correct.
Was he saying that the Commission's guidelines for assessing the temporary exemption applications had been written and applied in a way that effectively transgender identity becomes a superior right and can't be balanced against or overridden by sex-based rights? So in other words, the guidelines did not properly account for the fact that sex-based rights and gender identity rights are both protected attributes under the Act and that neither should automatically trump the other?
No, that's not the decision as it was written, Senator.
Okay. What was your understanding? Because he told you to update the guidelines, did he?
To take into account the Australian Human Rights Commission Act and to include the indivisibility and universality of human rights within our decision.
Have they been updated?
I understand that they're in the process of being updated.
When was this decision handed down?
In April of this year.
Okay, and they are in the position of being updated. In terms of the decision being remitted back to the Administrative Review Tribunal, what's the process now?
the Administrative Review Tribunal will sit and make a decision about the exemption application.
Right, and do you participate in that? Or do they just now look at the papers?
I'm not sure of the answer of that, Senator. I think that we would appear, but I'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Do you know, President, does the Commission appear?
The usual process is, as I understand it, you want a contradictor in those.
Yes.
Yes.
So you would have.
Yeah, my understanding is we would normally take that role.
Okay. Okay.
That's a clarifying question. Just thank you very much, Chair.
Senator Henderson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a clarifying question. Can I understand why did the Commission conclude that a temporary exemption sought by the Lesbian Action Group did not justify accommodation of sex-based association rights under the Sex Discrimination Act?
I would have to refresh myself on the decision in that matter, Senator, to come up with to refer to the reasons for why that was refused in that situation.
You don't recall?
It was a detailed decision. It was not just one-line decision.
Well, could you just perhaps explain, based on the principles, why the temporary exemption sought by the Lesbian
I'd
Action
have to
Group?
take that on notice, Senator.
And is that the stand of the Human Rights Commission going forward? So if another lesbian group was to make an application for an exemption, what would be the position of the Human Rights Commission?
Each exemption,
I'm just trying to understand why.
Each exemption application will be dealt with individually, case by case. There isn't a uniform position.
So what guidance would you give groups like the Lesbian Action Group, which is seeking to have their own events, to protect the right for them to gather based on biological sex, lesbian-born women? What advice would you give, or guidance does the Human Rights Commission provide to those sorts of organisations? Are you now, I mean, obviously your decision was overruled, effectively. Have you now reconsidered your position in relation to lesbian women, for instance?
We don't have a position, as I referred to previously. We would consider each application on a case-by-case individual basis, and we would refer anyone who was coming to the Commission seeking an exemption to our guidelines, and as they will be updated.
Have you got any
Thank you,
applications?
Senator Henderson. Senator Cash.
Thank you. Have you got any applications? Are there any applications on foot for special exemptions for biological woman groups that you're considering?
I'm unaware of whether there are or there aren't. I'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Okay. If I was to look at now what's actually happened in terms of what's been called the definition void, the Sex Discrimination Act does not define man or woman at this point in time, and that now appears to have caused problems. So if you go back to 2019, when the Gillard government amended the Act, it removed the biological definitions of man and woman from Section 4 and inserted gender identity as a new protected attribute. There are also other flow-on effects, as you know, so it changed references from opposite sex to different sex. The result now at law would appear to be that the Act no longer contains any definition of what a man or a woman actually is, because we removed the biological definitions of man and woman. You now have the word woman appearing throughout the legislation, and in fact you yourself in your submission in the Tickle and Giggle case, for example, in relation to the pregnancy provisions and the fact that transgender women, biological men, may wish to have the pregnancy provisions or the potential pregnancy provisions, protections extended to them, etc. So the case of Tickle and Giggle has now filled that vacuum in plain English by ruling that at law, I think we established this when we all sat down today.
I've been watching this online. I've been sitting here, and these long statements are not a substitute for a question, and not a substitute for a question. You can tell it's a question because there's a rising inflection at the end of a fairly short statement. This is not a question. It's just like another lecture.
No.
Thank
I'm
you,
summing
Senator
up
Shubridge.
what I believe the current status of the law is.
Thank you, Senator
That's
Shubridge.
what I'm actually doing.
I have already made a comment to the committee about long preambles into questions. So I have already noted that that is not what I want to see continue. But Senator Cash, if you can please ask the question.
Thank you, Chair. Look at the Tickle and Giggle case. It's filled that vacuum by ruling that sex, and I think you said this up front, is changeable and not necessarily binary, meaning that a biological man with an amended birth certificate, for example, can legally be treated as a woman under the Act. Is that now where we literally are in terms of what your role is as the Sex Discrimination Commissioner in applying the law?
I'm sorry, Senator, I'm not sure which bit of that is the question. So could you please repeat the question itself?
Definitions of man and woman in 2013. It has now had flow-on consequences to the Act, and that has now become the crux of the problem.
The previous definition of woman did not include before 2013 any reference to biology, so that is incorrect. And our current state of the law in relation to sex I referred to earlier. There are 3 characteristics that a court will look at to decide sex. That is biology, physical characteristics, how the person is perceived socially and how they perceive themselves.
And
Those
then you
are the
have
3
the gender
aspects.
identity.
Gender identity.
Which is a protected attribute within,
Correct.
is it section 7B?
That's correct.
So the change...
Viewers, that exchange should not be dismissed as procedural tension. It exposed the practical failure created by legal ambiguity. The Sex Discrimination Commissioner appeared unable to clearly answer how biological women remain protected under a framework that now elevates gender identity while weakening sex-based certainty. And the Lesbian Action Group case provides this not as theoretical. A group of lesbians sought lawful protection to gather as lesbians born female. The Commissioner refused. The tribunal upheld that refusal, and the federal court then found legal error and sent the matter back for reconsideration. And that should have produced humility, clarity, and reform. Instead, the Commissioner appeared unable to explain whether she would participate in fixing the deficient framework, while defending her office through general claims of good work rather than answering the core questions. And this is institutional exposure. The issue is not hatred toward anyone. The issue is whether women can still organise, recover, worship, speak, gather and protect female-only spaces without being overridden by gender identity ambiguity. Human law is not sovereign over male and female reality. Divine sovereign restraint requires institutions to recognise creative distinction, not revise it into confusion. Keep it within constitutional sanity. And the final question remains, if the Commissioner responsible for sex discrimination cannot clearly defend women's sex-based protections after the federal court exposed legal error in the exemption framework, then what exactly is being protected? Women or the system that made women's protection uncertain? And putting it uncertain is very kind. I'm Dr. J.W. Ayub, theologist. Like and subscribe to help me, comment to educate me, and share to help somebody else. Bye for now.